Yo, what's up, guys? And today we're going to be talking about how Superman 2025 finally gets the character right and does the character justice. Okay, so the movie opens in the Arctic with a Star Wars esque intro. This is where we're told about the history of this new, bright, rich, and comic accurate DC universe. This Star Wars intro was actually David Cornswell's idea because he's a really big Star Wars fan. Another one of his ideas was to actually give Superman the trunks, which I think was an amazing choice by him and by James Gunn. And the reasoning behind it was so that Superman feels kind of like a joke and feels kind of more lighthearted and isn't so intimidating to kids. Every time jump or time stamp goes up in a number of threes. This is just a cool detail. I'm not sure if it actually means anything, but I think it's just supposed to be a fun pattern, and 3 is really the only number that would work here without making Clark too old or without Superman being a thing for too long. It says 300 years ago metahumans appeared and ushered us into a new era of gods and monsters. This is a little Easter egg or callback to what James Gunn titled this first phase or chapter of his DC universe. It then says 30 years ago Kal-El was sent to Earth. 3 years ago Clark became Superman. 3 weeks ago Superman stopped the conflict with Baravia from trying to invade Jahanpur. 3 hours ago, the Hammer Baravia attacked Metropolis, and 3 minutes ago, Superman lost his first ever fight. So James Gunn makes the bold decision to start this off by skipping the origin story and making Superman be in his 3rd year. This is pretty controversial and divisive, but I think after seeing the movie, it works for the best, and I can see why he made this decision. When you're dealing with a character as popular as Superman or Batman or Spider-Man, and everybody knows them and their origin because of their immense popularity, it kind of just makes sense to skip it. And we're going to talk more about this origin later because I still think we get the best of both worlds. So the film really kicks off just like how the first ever teaser trailer did, and that is with Superman crash landing in the Arctic. This is a great choice, and it puts Superman in a very weak state, and it shows a lot of his human side. Clark is beaten really bad and has to call for help. And he actually has to call from nothing other than his dog, which is a man's best friend. Krypto saves Superman and takes him to the Fortress of Solitude. This is another great choice because Superman is the most human one in here. Everyone else is either a robot or an animal. And this is important to show how Superman treats others, whether they're human or not. He treats Krypto and the rest of the Superman robots with respect, care, and compassion. The robots start healing Clark and resting him up as they play his parents' message to keep him calm. Unfortunately, they only have access to half of Jor-El's and Lara's message because the other half was actually lost and destroyed when Clark's ship was crash landed and destroyed in Kansas. After the healing process, Clark makes sure to thank all the robots for everything that they did before heading back out and continuing his fight. Here we get Superman's first flight, and we get to hear that amazing classic remixed Superman theme. And the theme kind of has a little punk rock element to it, and we'll touch more on that later because it'll be important. We then continue with the battle between Superman and the Hammer Baravia. We were obviously dropped in the middle of this story, and we learned a lot through exposition and the Star Wars intro. But instead of getting any flashbacks, we just go full on and continue the story. We get very similar scenes to what have happened before, but we just build on top of those, which I think is a very good idea. We learn that Lex and his crew are controlling the Hammer Baravia, and we also learn that they actually let Superman escape the last fight so that the engineer could follow him and track him to the Fortress of Solitude and locate it. We see the Hammer attack a pitch meeting for Choco's Cookies, which is a direct tease to Martian Manhunter. The Hammer slams Superman into the ground and he crashes into a crowd of people. Everyone rushes over to help him and check on him. And honestly, I love this because it's a total 180 from past iterations of the character. And I think that's for the best. I think that's a really smart idea. A man named Malik Ali helps Superman up, and he tells them that Superman has saved them so many times and now it's time for them to return the favor for him. The Hammer tells the crowd that he's attacking because of Superman's actions in Baravia, and this is really Lex's first move to turn the public against Superman. This scene works so well because it doesn't only show how Superman affects the people, but how the people affect Superman too. This is all set up so we better understand and care for Clark when the people do eventually turn on him later on. The next day, Clark goes into work at the Daily Planet. This is our first introduction to the side characters in Clark's life, and in order we see Perry White, Steve Lombard, Cat Grant, Ron Troop, Jimmy Olsen, and Lois Lane. Clark also gets a call from Ma and Pa Kent, who are both still alive in this universe and have very important roles in this movie. They congratulate Clark on his front page cover about Superman, and Clark, Lois, and Jimmy watch the news as the president of Arabia speaks out about the attack. Clark and Lois have some fake friendly banter over the drama with Superman. And later on, Clark surprises Lois with dinner for the 3-month anniversary. Clark decides to let Lois interview him as Superman, and this is one of the best scenes in the movie in my opinion. We learn that Superman threatened the president of Arabia, and he actually didn't inform anyone in the US that he was going to do so. Lois tries getting him to understand the problems he caused, but Superman is rightfully more focused on the fact that he saved people, and that if he didn't act, a bunch of people would have died.
People were going to die!
Both of them have very strong and valid points and arguments in this scene, and I think this is what makes it so special and important, because we see how Clark and Lois and their different ideologies cause them to see things differently and fight. Superman explains to Lois that his parents sent him to Earth to serve humanity and help the world be a better place. And for me, this is where I finally kind of understood Superman a little bit more. Superman wasn't sent to Earth to make America better. He was sent to make the world better. And with Superman's insane power, it allows him to do so. Batman and Spider-Man are still human. They can only do so much. Batman wants to make Gotham a better city so that things that happen to him and his parents will never happen to anyone again. Spider-Man wants to help around the neighborhoods of New York because he knows that with his powers comes responsibility. But it is also only so much either one of them can do. For me personally, this is what I needed to see from Superman. And I, like a lot of people, think that he's just so powerful, and due to that, he's a little bit less relatable and less interesting than a lot of other heroes. But I think this scene does a really good job at showing us that that isn't necessarily true. We see him struggle with things just like we all struggle with, and he struggles with the same things that a lot of heroes struggle with. It's just on a much deeper level due to his immense power. Clark eventually decides to leave, but before he does, Lois says that she knew this whole thing would never work out. This one line is super important because it makes their whole relationship weird and puts them in a really sticky situation. Lex, Ultraman, the Engineer, and Eve Tessmacher land in the Arctic and locate the Fortress of Solitude. They destroy all the Superman robots and capture Krypto. Lex then uses the Engineer to decrypt the other half of the message Jor-El and Laura sent with Kal-El to try using it against him and getting information out of it. To make sure Superman is occupied by this happening and doesn't come, Lex gets his crew to release a giant kaiju onto the city. This is another one of my favorite scenes for two main reasons. One, the action. It's really good and it feels ripped straight out of a comic book. Two, we get to see how much Superman values lives. Not only human lives, but all lives in general, no matter what, whether it's an animal or a monster. They make it super crucial in this scene to show Superman saving lives and that he values them. Here we get our first scenes with the Justice Gang, and we get to see how similar they are to Superman, but also how different they are from him. Since Superman has backup and has to do a little bit less, he's able to focus more on saving people and creatures. Superman even tries to save the kaiju itself. He just wants to get it out of the city safely and then figure out what to do with it, but the Justice Gang has other plans. After they defeat it, we get to see the citizens of Metropolis cheer for the heroes, but the moment takes a turn pretty quickly. During the fight, Lex has revealed that Superman is bad and that his parents really sent him to Earth to take over and rule. Everyone freaks out and turns on Kal-El, and at first Superman and the other heroes don't actually believe it. We as an audience don't actually believe it either, but after going inside and getting away from the public, Mr. Terrific affirms that the message is in fact real. A lot of people are kind of split on this decision, but I love it, and I'll talk more about why I love it later on. Superman realizes everything Lex has done to the Fortress of Solitude, the robots, and even Krypto, and he goes to confront him. I think this is probably the most upset that we've seen Superman the whole entire movie, and I love how they handled this. He storms into Luthor Corp, but he makes sure not to hurt Lex. He just wants answers. Some may say he didn't hurt him because of the cameras that were there, but I truly think from what we've seen of this Superman so far, he still would have handled it in a very similar way with or without cameras. This moment transitions to the public calling Superman crazy, and we get a crazy Peacemaker cameo, which I completely did not expect. We also get to see here that Ma and Pop Kent have tried calling Clark multiple times, and I really love that detail. A quick little thing I realized on rewatch is that the meeting that Lex was in when Superman stormed into the office was the guy on the talk show. So this guy might be corrupt or paid off or something, or maybe not, but Lex was meeting with him, which is kind of odd to me. So Clark flies into his apartment and he sees this interview. He's at his lowest, but he's not alone. In a callback from earlier where Clark surprised Lois in her apartment, now Lois is doing the same for Clark, and she's taking care of him when he needs it the most. Lois asks about everything, and when Clark explains it, she immediately believes him. The people closest to Clark understand him, and they know the kind of person he is. They don't question him or anything he does. This is a testament to how good of a person Clark truly is and how people who really know him really view him. Lois makes him cocoa, and then they make up after their fight. Lois explains what she meant when she said that things would never work out. This is one of my favorite scenes of the movie, and this is one of the scenes I did tear up at because I think this is another scene that just gets Superman so well. And Lois continues to explain that she's just some punk rock kid and that he's Superman and the most popular hero ever. And Superman comforts her and connects with her and reassures her and says that he's just a punk rock kid too. And this is why I think we can hear a bit of that punk rock element in his theme. I think it's to represent his human side and also represent Lois, who's one of the most important humans to him. Lois says that she questions everyone and everything, and that Clark sees the best in everyone and everything. And he thinks that everyone he's ever met is just beautiful. But Clark tells her that that's what the real meaning of punk rock is. This is all Clark needed to hear, and then he decides to turn himself in peacefully to keep everyone he loves safe. He also says that he wants to be with Krypto and make sure he's okay, since he knows that he's probably alone and scared right now. But before leaving, Clark makes sure to give Lois a hug. Clark tells her that he loves her, but the scene ends. Superman turns himself in, and Lex puts him in a cell with Metamorpho. This is a great idea writing-wise, because James Gunn is using the fantastical comic booky developed universe that we've already just jumped into to its full potential. And just the first DCU movie alone, we've gotten to see things like the Fortress of Solitude, Krypto, Kryptonite, a Green Lantern, a Hall of Justice, pocket universes, black holes, and so much more. And these are all things that would probably take years upon years to build up to if you start from point one and if it's an origin story. This is what further solidifies the decision to make us just jump into it at an early point on. But anyways, back to the point. This situation is really genius because it puts Clark in a spot where he has to inspire hope into Metamorpho, who really doesn't want to do all of this, but he has to do it for his son. Superman is at his toughest and lowest spot in his life, and he still has to be strong and carry hope if he wants to get out of it alive. This takes us to Lois and Jimmy, and we get to see what they're doing. They're trying to prove that Luthor is lying and help clear Superman's name. Lois does this by meeting up with the Justice Gang and trying to assemble them to help free Superman, and Jimmy's job is to get information from one of Lex's closest allies, his girlfriend, Jimmy's ex-girlfriend, Eve Tessmacher. A big worry for this movie, for me and I think a lot of people out there, was how are they going to balance the comedy, and also how are they going to balance the large amount of characters. But thankfully, James Gunn kind of handled this in a two birds with one stone kind of way, and most of the comedy came from the Justice Gang, and most of those extra characters that we were worried about were the Justice Gang. So they're probably the funniest part of the movie, but they also are only in it for a couple of scenes. And I think that is why this movie works so well. I think they're in it for the perfect amount of time, and I don't think they take any focus away from Superman, Lois, or Lex. Lois tries recruiting them to help, but the only one that she can manage to have hear her out is Mr. Terrific. And thank God, because he's about to get an insanely good fight scene, and it's honestly probably one of the best scenes in the movie. But I've been saying that about every scene. Maybe that just shows how good this movie is. Unfortunately, before we get into that, we have to talk about another scene that had me tearing up. And man, this is just hard. Because we see Lex decides in order to get Superman to talk, he needs to hurt people that Superman has connections with and that Superman cares about. Knowing this, Lex brings in Malik Ali, the man who helped Superman earlier. Lex loads a 6-shooter and plays Russian roulette. And then, in one of the crazy scenes in this whole entire movie, we see Lex take Malik out with no remorse. This film also does such an amazing job at establishing Lex as just a pure hater and a straight villain. And seeing Superman's reaction to all this and just the tears roll down his face was just so sad, and it hit so hard. And it was really hard to watch, but I think it really helps the character. I mean, this shows what Superman stands for. Malik really didn't mean that much for Superman, and Superman definitely meant more to him. Superman saves hundreds of people a day. It's hard for him to keep count and remember everyone. But being saved by Superman is something that a citizen of Metropolis or just anybody in the DC universe would cherish forever. And Malik stayed on Superman's side no matter what. He knew Superman wasn't trying to rule the world, and he died a hero. He never thought that Superman had any other schemes or plans to take over or do anything nefarious. Superman's reaction to just a living human being being killed is so strong, and it really makes you imagine what his reaction will be like when he loses things that he cares even more about, like maybe Ma or Pa Kent in the future. This really sucks for Superman, but it's really the only way that he got out. Seeing how little Lex cares about anyone or anything makes Metamorpho really rethink everything and question if what he's doing is really even worth it at the end of the day. This lets Superman finally show him the hope he represents and gives him what they need to escape. And do I even have to say anything here about this epic fight scene with Mr. Terrific just completely shredding through Lex's Raptors? After this awesome fight, we get another one, which is even crazier, where Superman and Metamorpho work together to free Krypto and Metamorpho's son, Baby Joey. They all almost get sucked into a crazy black hole, but with the help of Lois and Mr. Terrific, Superman manages to use his breath to send all of them back through the pocket universe, and they barely manage to make it out alive before it closes in on them. Everyone is okay except for Superman. Him being in the cell with Metamorpho for so long has gave him kryptonite poisoning, and Mr. Terrific tells Lois and Krypto that they need to rush him back home to his parents in Smallville. Metamorpho and Baby Joey manage to escape and run off into the woods, but they look back at Superman and feel grateful and hopeful. After finding out Superman got away, Lex is pissed with everyone. He yells at Eve and decides to lock her up in the same prison, but before he does, she sends Jimmy photos with evidence against Lex in the background. I think this next scene we're about to talk about is probably one of the most emotional ones in the movie. And if you guys watch my review, you guys know that one of my few complaints and nitpicks about this movie was just not enough time with Ma and Pa Kent. That really was just a nitpick because their scenes are amazing and they're just so good that I wanted more of them. We first get to see them and Lois comfort Clark as he lays in his childhood bedroom. In his bedroom are posters and toys for the things he loves. This is something just so small, but it's still so important because, I mean, look in the background, like I have posters and stuff. It makes him so much more relatable. Seeing toys and posters, that's what everybody has. Every kid growing up has stuff like that. Even though he's an alien, he's adopted, and he's so different from us, he's still so similar to us. And he understands every single human because the people he was raised by for the majority of his life are humans. After this, we get to see a great scene where Clark watches Crypto play with his parents' farm animals. John comes outside to comfort Clark, and he tells Clark exactly what he needs to hear. Like I said before, I know some people are against the twist, but I honestly think it works really well and helps make Superman an even better and more interesting character. John explains that it doesn't matter what his parents wanted him to do, it matters what he decided to do. He took the message as to do good stuff, and that's what he decided to do. He never thought the message meant to rule over or be bad, and that's why he didn't do it. Martha interrupts this conversation and shows Clark the footage of Baravia once again invading Jahanpur. She cleans up his suit for him and gets him ready to get back out there and go help people. Clark's human parents are the reason he is the way he is today. They're the ones that raised him, and he grew up with them. So they taught him to be a good man, and that's why he is a good man. In Jahanpur, the citizens prepare to defend themselves, but they have nothing compared to Baravia. Baravia has tanks and machine guns compared to Jahanpur's sticks and stones. They're beginning to lose hope, and that's when they realize their best bet is to call out Superman, the man who can give you hope no matter what. Unfortunately for them, Metropolis needs Superman too. The Pocket Universe is expanding throughout the city and is causing tons of damage. The citizens are forced to evacuate, and we get to see an awesome Easter egg of Gotham City. And man, did this just make me want to see this Superman with a Batman even more. Whether that's Robert Pattinson or a different actor, I just need it ASAP. Anyways, all this chaos causes a traffic jam. But despite that, almost everyone still manages to escape the city, except for one woman who's in a car. And she's stuck as a giant tower is about to come crashing down onto her. At the last second, Superman lifts the tower and gives her the time to drive away. Superman emerges from the dust and ashes and meets up with Mr. Terrific, but they get ambushed by the Engineer and Ultraman. They manage to take out Mr. Terrific and cause Clark to have to go against them by himself. Clark manages to hold his own against them, but eventually the Engineer thinks to try using her nanites to suffocate him. Clark has to fly up into space and then come crashing down in order to get the nanites off of him and also take the Engineer out of the fight. This powerful blast destroys Ultraman's mask. We learned that it was a clone of Superman the whole time, and now Clark can get his one-on-one with him. Superman and Ultraman continue their fight, but the war in Jahanpur is still escalating. Superman explains to Lex that his plans in Baravia already failed because no matter what happens with him, he's already called in some backup to protect the citizens of Jahanpur. We learn that Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, and Metamorpho have been inspired by Superman and came to save the day. Lex doesn't really care and explains to Superman that the whole conflict in Baravia and Jahanpur was only so that he could have an excuse to kill Superman, not for any land or any money, just so he could kill the one person he hates. The Justice Gang has a really cool and fun fight scene against the army of Baravia, and it results in Hawkgirl killing their president and Guy Gardner letting Metamorpho join the team. The Daily Planet crew gathers their evidence and escapes the city and Mr. Terrific's T-Craft. They upload an article with all the information and everything they have against Lex and prove that he was behind everything the whole time. Superman and Ultraman are still fighting, and Superman is losing pretty bad. This is because Lex is using his greatest strength, which is his mind. He's controlling Ultraman like a chess piece, and he explains to Superman why he hates him so much, but Superman eventually uses Lex's ideas and outsmarts him. Just like when he was beaten at the beginning of the movie, Superman whistles out to Krypto and gets him to destroy all of Lex's drones watching the fight. This leaves it to be a fair one-on-one with Superman and Ultraman. And without Lex controlling him, Ultraman has no brain of his own. We finally get to see Superman let off more of his power and let loose. And he goes crazy against Ultraman and Lex's Raptors. He fights Ultraman one final time and throws Ultraman into the black hole. And I'm actually kind of guessing that Ultraman may return someday as Bizarro. If you pay close attention, you can see earlier that when the things were getting sucked into the black hole, they were getting turned into these little cubes. So maybe there's a planet in this black hole that would be Bizarro World, and we could see him in the future. Lex tells his crew to let the crack keep spreading and let everyone die for choosing Superman over him, which goes to show the contrast between these two even more. Superman is an alien, has no connection to any creature on this planet, but he still cares so much for all of them. Lex, on the other hand, is one of us, and yet he values no lives except for his own. Lex notices Superman flying towards the building and tries to make a run for it, but it's pointless. Mr. Terrific shuts everything down while Lex screams at Superman and calls him an alien. But Superman interrupts him and tells him that's where he's wrong. Clark tells us exactly what we need to hear. Superman is as human as anyone. He loves, he gets scared, he tries to make the best choices that he can, but he still makes mistakes. But the beauty about all of that is that that's exactly what it means to be human. And that's what Superman's greatest strength is. Krypto then attacks Lex and drags him and slams him around, just like Loki was dragged and slammed around by Hulk in the first Avengers movie. Superman goes down to the streets of Metropolis where he finds Lois, and he tells her that he's going to give her an interview. They find a private area to be alone, and they share a kiss. And this is where Lois finally tells him that she loves him too. Superman sits in the Fortress of Solitude, where Supergirl comes in super drunk to pick up Krypto, and the two leave to get into whatever their next adventure may be. The robots start healing Superman and ask him if he wants to see the footage of his parents, since they know that he finds it soothing. Superman of course says yes, but this time something's different. It's not his biological parents from Krypton, it's his human parents, and we finally get to see Clark's childhood, and we get to see him growing up into the man he is today. His biological parents thought he'd take over the world and rule, but it wasn't the way that he was raised. He was raised to have hope, love, and compassion. Superman finally heals, but whereas at the beginning of the movie he was screaming in pain, now he just looks up to the sun calmly and rests with a smile on his face. Man, I really love that movie, and I know a lot of people did too. I'm so happy that we got to break it down and talk about it, and I want to know your guys' thoughts about everything. We're gonna do a similar video like this to the Batman because, DC is in good hands. Whether they combine these universes, whatever they do, we have a very good iteration of Batman and Superman right now, and I think we really needed that for both characters, mainly Superman more, because I think we've gotten good Batman before, at least better versions of Superman. But the video's already long enough. I just want to let you guys know that's how I felt about the movie. I loved the ending. I love everything about it. And that final scene had me tearing up. I think it had a lot of people tearing up, but it was so similar to the Batman, I feel like, and that makes me want to go back. We never got to talk about the Batman on the channel. So the next video like this, I'm not sure when it will be, but it's going to be about the Batman. So stay tuned if you're interested. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and peace out.